Everyone, welcome. I'm Charlie Seelye, Chair. This is the Metropolitan Council meeting, August 9th. And sorry, a few minutes late. Welcome guests. Sorry, we are in a meeting room that's not our chambers because of some technology upgrades that we're doing. And of course, you do that in the summer when things are slow, but at Met Council, things are never slow. So what were we thinking? Anyway, so sorry you're sitting in chairs and we're kind of squished in. There's a lot of business items before the agenda, on the agenda today, and unless there's any concern about the agenda, I will assume that it is approved, which brings us to the council minutes from the meeting on July 26th, 2023. Is there any comments or a motion or a second to approve?
Second.
Thank you. Any corrections, additions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. So now we have an opportunity for public comment, which we've begun in better in a better way now that we actually are in person, which is so much nicer than just virtual. So we are kind of limiting the time for total public comment to about 15 minutes, but we have a number of people. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 people signed up, so we should have time for 3-minute presentations on a subject not on the agenda. And first up is Nancy Nord-Bentz.
I think I said no to speaking.
No to speaking, you did. I should read what's in front of me.
Can you believe it?
But here's your name, Nancy, and I just had to say it out loud, so there you are.
Thank
Okay. You're here.
See, sometimes.
Tom Darling. Tom, I know, is here. Great.
So, hello, my name is Tom Darling, and I am the president of the Summit Avenue Residential Preservation Association, or SARPA. And before I really start my comments, I want to thank Ms. Bento because she alerted me and some others to the fact that we would be able to speak today. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known about it, so thank you so much for that. Now, I'm here to talk about the Summit Avenue Regional Trail Plan that you folks, I think, will have on your agenda at the next meeting. And SARPA and literally thousands of others opposed that plan. And I have, there are many good reasons for the opposition. But I want to talk about something slightly different. Now, I've gone to many presentations about this plan, in favor essentially of this plan. And I will predict, or betting person, I bet, that you all will be told at your next meeting that your role is strictly limited. And you'll be told that you're not a court of appeal. And you'll be told that you really only have to look at the surface, whether, quote, the plan meets the Met Council's policies and plans. Now that's nice, lofty language, but my observation, and I've been observing this a lot, is that it boils down to you must be a rubber stamp. That you must take what the city says at face value. You cannot go below the surface. You can't go back and challenge or ask to have additional information about the facts that the city presents. That's wrong. This plan, if approved, means that you will be creating a regional trail on Summit Avenue. And that is your responsibility. That is not the city's responsibility. And you must not be a rubber stamp. You must ask for and get information that you need to make a reasoned decision. Now, there's literally thousands of people that presented many, many, many facts that show, I mean, everyone knows at some level, I think Ms. Johnson, maybe not at the highest level as I think, but Summit Avenue is truly special. It's not only special for St. Paul, it's special for the region, metropolitan region, it's special for the state, and it is special in the United States. And the city pays lip service to that, but they don't act on it. They are presenting a plan to you that threatens the natural resource base along Summit Avenue. Hundreds of trees will be cut down. They glibly, back of the envelope, estimates, oh no, it'll be 14%, it'll be the same as if we reconstructed the street. There are many facts that demonstrate that's not true. There are arborist reports. The city has never engaged with those. They have never made an inquiry. Hey, why are your numbers so different from our numbers? You need to get to the bottom of that, I believe. And what about the historic streets? Their own experts have said, you can't move the curbs. You'll destroy the historic nature of Summit Avenue. What are they going to do? They're going to move every curb. So you can't just say, okay, the city says it's going to be fine. You have to look into it. You'll hear about public engagement. You'll see, yeah, this meeting, that meeting. You'll say, we had a focus survey. That survey was 89 people or something like that.
I'm sorry, we have to try to keep it.
Oh,
Do you have any
I'm on the
concluding
second
remarks?
page here. Anyhow, I know, I'm confident, you folks will receive a citizen's petition for an environmental assessment worksheet about this proposed regional trail. Please take the opportunity that gives you to get the information you need. It's really going to be an excellent opportunity. There's no urgency, the city has said forever. We have no plans, there's no urgency. Take the time to get the facts, and thank you so very much.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to hear from Jonathan Popil.
Populi. Thank you.
Place. All right.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to talk with you today. I'd like to also speak with you, as you might have guessed, about the bike trail along Summit Avenue. I'd like to, first of all, just say I really am not very appraised on the political workings of this. I just would like to share a little bit about what I see as the merits of the proposal. I just want to say a couple of things about myself. I began riding my bike on Summit Avenue in the 1970s when the elm trees still formed the cathedral arch over Summit. And I've been riding my bike there ever since. In the last couple of years, I've been back riding with my cycling club, and last year rode approximately 700 miles just on Summit Avenue, riding end to end a few days each week. It's a street I'm deeply familiar with. I've done just about everything there is to do on a bike. I use it for fitness, I use it for recreation, I use it for socializing, I use it for commuting, and I've also the author of 25 Great Bike Rides of the Twin Cities. This isn't a plug, the book has gone out of print. Just wanted to share a little bit about my credentials. I think I've given more thought than many to what makes a good bike trail for family-friendly bike rides. The Summit Avenue is a unique corridor for cycling in the Twin Cities. It is a great connection directly to downtown St. Paul. It's a good commuting connection, and it's currently used primarily by commuters and by high-speed recreational riders, those of us who are sometimes referred to as being the Lycra crowd. So this is my business suit for the day. This is a poor corridor for a recreational trail. And the reason it's a poor corridor for a recreational trail is because of the number of cross streets, intersections, and driveways. If you look at the good recreational trails across the Twin Cities, they run along river corridors, they run along rail lines, they run in places where there's very little cross traffic. Transforming a good quality commuting corridor into a low quality recreational corridor is not adding bicycle infrastructure in the Twin Cities. It's taking away a good resource and providing what might be a nice recreational corridor for some kids, but there are lots of those. And I'd like to say, more importantly, this trail corridor would be for low-speed riding. The single largest growing sector of bicycle commuters are e-bikes. The largest growing sector of bicycle sales are e-bikes. And the largest growing sector of bicycle e-bike sales are class 3 e-bikes, which have a maximum speed of 28 miles an hour motor assisted. Nobody, if they look at this trail, will think that it's a good trail for riding a bike at 28 miles an hour. So I do encourage the council to take a close look at this and whether it is truly a good corridor for the future of bike commuting. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Now we're going to hear from Karen Sprattler. Welcome.
Hello, thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you briefly. My name is Karen Sprattler. I live in a neighborhood adjacent to Summit Avenue, but my professional credentials, I am a national subject matter expert on behavioral traffic safety. I do not purport to be an expert on bicycle safety, although there is a great deal of overlap in terms of data and methods that we all employ. I'm offended on both the personal and professional level on behalf of the 53 people who lost their lives on St. Paul's roadways in the last 3 years. 38 of those were vulnerable road users, but only 3 of them were bicyclists. None of the 53 road users and deaths occurred on Summit Avenue. There weren't even any serious injury crashes of any kind, much less involving bicycles on Summit Avenue in the last 3 years, where drivers are understandably distracted by the beautiful landscape and architecture. Fatalities and serious injuries are the metrics that road safety professionals use to prioritize the allocation of scarce funding to improve actual safety conditions. The advocates for the trail talk about perceived safety. What should be the priority? Flesh and blood people who lost their lives on the streets of St. Paul, or a few bicyclists who are uncomfortable riding on this trail? In another vein, the irony is not lost on me at all when Mode Share Act advocates speak glowingly about the potential environmental and climate benefits to replace an already existing and safe trail, one that, as I understand, could be designated by you as an on-road regional trail as it exists today. These advocates profess to care about the environment and yet support removing hundreds of mature carbon-reducing trees and supplanting living, growing, oxygen-producing boulevards with almost 500,000 square feet of asphalt. This trail is an extraordinary example of the entitlement of a few over the wishes of thousands. Do not advance the city's proposed plan.
Thank you, Karen. Now, Carolyn Will.
Thank you, council members, for the opportunity. My testimony is more of a question, a rather large question. The Metropolitan Council has a division titled Growing Shade, an interactive resource to inform tree canopy enhancement and preservation for the Twin Cities region. Now, how can you, as a council, stand behind Growing Shade and then turn right around and vote in favor of this trail plan that would take down nearly 1,000 healthy, mature trees along one stretch of road 4.5 miles long, located within an urban, densely populated area? And sure, we hear that Summit Avenue needs to be reconstructed, and so that's why, trees will be a casualty. No, not necessarily. The road construction can happen within the road bed. It's the trail construction that carves into the medians and the boulevards that will cause the destruction of the tree canopy. And I would be so happy to walk any one of you who would like to be feet on the ground and look at just even one segment with all of the marks laid out in the ground so that you can see what we're talking about. The curbs will be pulled up, the medians will be moved in, the trees are planted along the edge, the trees are coming down. Okay. Lastly, our state should be using more modern road construction methods. Horizontal directional drilling is used by most parts in the country, and our state is really behind on embracing that on more of our projects, so I'm just saying that. And now, truly, last point, where is the money coming from for this project? Don't we all want more transparency? And the money for paying for the road construction and the regional bike trail has still not been shared with the constituency. And I think that needs to be transparent, that needs to be laid out before the council should vote in favor of this. Thank you. And then another constituent did not see the sign-up sheet, and I didn't realize that he hadn't gotten his name on there, so could we add one more name?
Sure.
Mark Hoppy.
Mark Hoppy, okay.
Thank you.
All right, but, thank you. But first, Bob Catlett.
Good afternoon, Bob Ketnack. I immodestly consider myself a pretty dedicated cyclist. Actually, John and I are in the same bike team. He looks a little bit better in spandex than I do, but that's why he gets to do that. I commute year-round to Minneapolis. Been doing so for about 25 years. I get bike probably 6,000 miles a year. I love Summit Avenue. I don't like its condition, but you can fix that. I will submit to you, because I've done a tremendous amount of research on this, that the trail design that you're being asked to approve is a terrible design for Summit Avenue. John said that design works great if you're along the Mississippi, because you don't have conflicts all the time. But it's terrible for Summit Avenue. But don't take my word for it. Do not. I'm not an expert. And neither is anybody from the city that designed this trail or approved it. None of them have the training, experience, or education in bicycle facility design. None. There's been no expert. And the world is full of them who can say, in this setting, this is the right trail. This is the wrong trail for the wrong place. But again, there's no reason to rush this. You can get this right. And if you take the time to talk to the experts, and they tell you, you know what, we looked at it. This is the best design. So be it. They're not going to tell you that. They will not tell you that because it's not correct. But my point is, why rush this? Just get it right. And there are three important things that have not been done that need to be done. One is there's been no environmental assessment of the impacts of this trail. You've heard about the trees. There are other problems. Carolyn mentioned you don't need to rip up Summit Avenue to deal with the infrastructure. I did a data practice act for the city, and all they had was, what we need to do is line the sewers. We can do that without ripping up the street. They can fix the water mains without ripping up the street. Just drill horizontally. So number one, you really need to look at, do we need to rip this street up? And if so, we do. But you will find out that you don't, and the environmental consequences of doing that are horrendous. The second thing, but it's related, is the historical impact. And this is, I think, the biggest piece that's been glossed over. We all know Summit Avenue. It's a gem. We love the trees. The streetscape is a beautiful piece of work. It's symmetrical, you drive down the street. How many of you know the following? 2 miles of the 4.5 miles in Summit Avenue are no longer going to be a straight street. It's going to zigzag between Lexington and the cathedral. Instead of having a nice symmetrical street, you're going to go north side, then you're going to zigzag south side for a few blocks, and you're going to zigzag north again. It's not going to look anything like it looks today, and the historical implications are horrendous. And the city's own consultant, Bolton and Mank, said, don't do it. Do not do this. Keep those existing curbs in place. Not keep the construction within the curbs, keep the curbs in place. To do that, you need to keep that symmetrical streetscape. You don't need to have a zigzag design. The last thing I'd say is, if you would just consider getting it right, I'm not asking you to say no. If you take just a little bit of time, we're talking not years, but just a few months, get one recognized expert in bicycle facility design to sit right here and say, I've looked at it. The city's right. You're done. If they say, as I submit to you they will, this is a bad design and it's going to ruin the environment by chopping down a bunch of trees, it's going to ruin the historical streetscape, we can do better and we deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, our last speaker, Mark Hoppe.
Sorry for not signing in, I didn't see the sign-in sheet. So, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Mark Hoppe. My wife, 3 kids, and I have biked Summit Avenue for probably a combined total of 100 years. So, and to be honest, we're on Summit Avenue every other day. Since my kids were 5 or 6, they've been active bikers of their own. And as members of Grand Performance, they were on the youth team. They've been on the Grand Performance youth team and grew up. Now my son is riding with the Saturday morning ride on Grand Performance and the Tuesdays and Thursday ride. My kids were mountain bikers at the Highland High School with their mountain bike team. We've always enjoyed Southern Avenue and found it extremely safe, calm, and of course a picturesque bike path. The avenue and the path are welcome oases from the heat of many paths because of the mature canopies of trees. As a parent, the path was simple to instruct kids on. Simply stay in your lane, stop at red lights, go when the red light turns green. Summit Avenue has always been a perfect cool down to a long ride, picturesque, fairly lightly congested, and cooled by a wonderful canopy of trees. It's always a joy to ride out. And it's kind of our ride in, ride out. You go on a 40-mile bike ride, that's the slow ride in and the slow ride out. So upon hearing of the Summit Avenue bike plan, my kids and I were a bit confused. My daughter, who's now 21, she lives in Copenhagen, did a gap year in Copenhagen, obviously knows a lot about biking. It's a wonderful city to bike in. My son last year, because of GP, and lived above a bike shop in Italy. And so he knows a lot about biking because he biked throughout Europe all last year. And so he's fairly, they were like, why would the city create a much more dangerous path, especially to smaller children, by introducing almost 150 unmanaged intersections where drivers would have an obstructed view of the bikes trail due to the parked cars. These unmanaged intersections behind a row of parked cars hide the smaller riders from crossing the path to access the driveways. In addition, it removes the simple direction of parents. Stop at red lights, go at green, at only a dozen or so intersections for younger riders. Now, a younger rider must constantly watch both ways, say, am I supposed to go or not supposed to go? Is that car going to stop when it's going into the driveway or isn't it going to stop? Okay? With no clear managed right of way. I was encouraged when the transportation expert, because we had one at the Palace meeting I went to, she confirmed and said, this path is less safe than it currently is now. And that was a transportation expert, I believe, if you guys remember the lady from who spoke. So let's not compromise our children's safety. Furthermore, people have indicated the Summit Trail would be an east-west corridor. Although I can see how the trail integrates into the Mississippi Boulevard on the west, the trail doesn't flow at any reasonable manage to the east. Suggesting a trail down the Shepherd Road via to Kellogg Boulevard, right through the entrances and exits of I-94 and I-35E, when crossing West 7th in front of the Excel Center, then down a steep hill finally to the Sam Morgan Trail on Shepherd Road. This plan seems to lack any understanding of safe cycling pedestrian interactions. This will require the path to integrate with a reasonably narrow sidewalk and into arguably the most congested pedestrian intersection of St. Paul, right in front of the Excel Center. Furthermore, the lower Eagle section, when you go beyond that, Serenity, would need to cross the road at odd angles. Again, why is St. Paul promoting such a dangerous path with so many confusing points, especially to the youngest riders? Finally, St. Paul in this effort is going small and missing the obvious, much bolder, much better, much safer solution to an east-west corridor. Minneapolis hit a home run with the Greenway that created arguably the most successful bike corridor in Minnesota, and a very few bike and car danger intersections. A number of people have spoke about that today. The obvious solution is continuing the Greenway across the Mississippi, following the well-established train corridor and 8 Mill Road down to Shepherd Road. St. Paul should not take the unimaginative, easy solution that greatly increases the danger to our children. Let's be the city, the metropolitan region, that does the bold things and continues the great work that Minneapolis started with the Greenway. Let's improve St. Paul and the region with the correct solution. So in closing, let's put our energy behind a bike corridor from the Green Line to Shepherd Road, a gift that unites the community, not divides it, will be safely enjoyed by the generational riders, puts our children's safety first, and gives a generational gift to be enjoyed for years. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to all who have presented today. We're on to our business meeting. First, there are no consent business items on the agenda, so we are moving into the reports of standing committees. And first, the Community Development Committee. Councilmember Lilligren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Community Development Committee brings one item for consideration this evening. It is business item 2023-168. It's the City of St. Francis Serenity at Seelye Brook Comprehensive Plan Amendment. This proposed comprehensive plan amendment re-guides approximately 22.5 acres from agricultural to rural residential for the purposes of supporting the development of 4 single-family homes. The amendment location is in the part of the city with the Thrive MSP 2040 community designation as diversified rural. The amendment location is adjacent to Seelye Brook, which is a waterway that is currently impaired by E. coli. The City of St. Francis owns and operates its own wastewater treatment plant. The amendment location is not part of the city's long-term wastewater service area. The additional density supported by the amendment does not occur in a way that contributes to the preservation of natural features or potential future subdivision if and when urban services were to become available. The staff found that the proposed amendment conforms to regional systems plans. It's inconsistent with the 2040 Water Resources Policy Plan policies for preserving natural resources outside the long-term wastewater service area. It's also inconsistent with residential density policy in diversified rural areas. It is consistent with the remaining policies of Thrive MSP 2040, with the Housing Policy Plan, and is consistent with council forecasts. It also is compatible with the plans of adjacent and affected jurisdictions. Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council first authorize the City of St. Francis to place its comprehensive plan amendment into effect. Second, find that the amendment does not change the city's forecasts. Third, find that the amendment is inconsistent with Thrive MSP 2040 policies for residential density in the diversified rural portion of the city. Fourth, find that the amendment is inconsistent with the 2040 Water Resources Policy Plan policies for preserving natural resources outside the long-term wastewater service area. Fifth, strongly encourage the city to consider the application of ordinances that are consistent with the council's flexible residential development ordinance guidelines in cases in which the city may wish to consider densities greater than 4 units per 40 acres. And finally, sixth, advise the city to implement the advisory comments in the review record for land use and water resources.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that motion carried. On to the Environment Committee. Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. This afternoon, we have business item 2023-165. And request that the council authorize the regional administrator to award and execute contracts 22P375A-L. This is for Interceptor engineering services with a cumulative not to exceed amount of $52 million. These are master contracts needed to support the 2023 through 2028 authorized capital program. And the council received 18 proposals in January to be evaluated for consideration for this award. The evaluation panel of both council staff and external stakeholders ranked and selected the most technically qualified proposers. And the cost proposals of the highest ranked proposers were reviewed by a negotiation panel that negotiated pricing and agreed that the final prices have been determined to be fair and reasonable. Just for some perspective, members, we have 17 projects coming up in the next 5 years, 17 Interceptor projects with $1.2 billion. So these 12 companies, 12 engineering companies will be assisting us with that big effort. And so therefore, Mr. Chair and members of the council, I move that the council authorize the regional administrator to award and execute contracts 22P375A-L for Interceptor engineering services with cumulative not to exceed amounts of $52 million as outlined in business item 2023-165.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carried. There are no reports from the Management Committee, but there is on the Transportation Committee. Councilmember Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. Business item number 2023-134 is regarding approval of the Metro F-Line Final Corridor Plan. The Metro F-Line Final Corridor Plan identifies the station locations for the F-Line Arterial Bus Rapid Transit Corridor. The F-Line will run from Northtown Transit Center to downtown Minneapolis, serving Minneapolis, Columbia Heights, Hilltop, Fridley, Spring Lake Park, and Blaine. The stations in the plan are the result of detailed planning process that included close interagency coordination with MnDOT and the cities and counties served by the line, technical analysis of the transit corridor, and robust and ongoing community outreach and engagement. The final corridor plan incorporates and responds to feedback received on 2 previous versions of the plan during 2 public comment periods in the fall of 2022 and spring of 2023. Metro Transit staff met with hundreds of riders, station neighbors, and nearby businesses and members of the public. Metro Transit received letters of support for the plan from MnDOT, Hennepin County, the cities of Minneapolis and Fridley, and the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, in addition to strong public support for the project. Some station locations have been a focus of concerns raised by specific station neighbors, including Central and First Avenue and 7th Street and Central and Lowry. Metro Transit staff have met with these station neighbors to discuss their concerns in detail and analyze additional locations based on their feedback. Metro Transit staff are committed to continuing to communicate with these station neighbors during the engineering phase of the project to mitigate their concerns. I will note that we did have public comment at the Transportation Committee from several of the businesses at these different stations in question. We also, hope you all checked your email. We had a couple of letters that were forwarded, and we also received materials from one of the businesses here tonight. So based on the community feedback during the planning process, the plan was modified to include a station at 18 1/2 Avenue instead of 18th Avenue to better serve a major public housing building designated for seniors. Approval of the final corridor plan provides critical direction and focus to the detailed design and engineering phase, allowing the project to advance. Therefore, Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council approve the Metro F-Line Final Corridor Plan to establish the number and location of stations included in the project.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion, questions? Councilmember Venter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to make an ask of both our transit staff as well as the business owners who have concerns about the station locations. Unless a miracle occurs tonight, this item is going to be adopted. And I would just ask that we continue to work really closely throughout the planning, construction, and then following the construction, because I know a lot of the concerns have to do with what will be the condition of these stations, what impact will these stations have on these individual businesses. I think they're legitimate concerns, and as somebody, I think like all of us who is really concerned about supporting small businesses, I want not just our transit system, but the small businesses that it will hopefully benefit to truly benefit. So that's my ask. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I really appreciate the comments from Councilmember Vento. As a business owner myself, I understand how critical small things can have huge impacts on a business, so I think it's very important. In talking with the businesses, even through some of the comments at Transportation Committee, I think we made it clear to our staff that this was not the end of the conversation, but part of an ongoing conversation to make sure that the stations fit within the areas, work well with the businesses and the spaces, and to definitely make sure that we keep a really strong open door policy to make sure we're including their concerns along the way. And will actually make this a better route in the long run, because we want to be partners in this more than anything.
Councilmember Jones.
Thank you. I'm really heartened to hear all of this discussion about the impact to, of course, other properties along the route and the impacts to businesses, especially small businesses. And the letter that we got later about it's an audio engineering recording studio, just the vibration, and we'll hear about other impacts, I'm sure. We've got other corridors where we've got businesses that are very concerned about what's happening to them. And we've had other businesses on the E-line, for example, that at 50th and France raised, concerns about where the station locations were going to be located. And those unfortunately couldn't be moved, but I think staff is really working on how to adapt some of the feedback that they're getting so as to minimize the negative impacts. So, I'm gonna always be listening to those adjacent landowners and the businesses especially. And if you think about, what an entrepreneur has to do to start a business and keep it going, what maybe a family generational business as economies and times change, how they have to keep it going, whatever sector they're in, the things that they've faced during, a Great Recession, a pandemic, and so on. Things like this just, literally freak out business owners, and especially if they've got mortgages or commitments, they just don't know what their future looks like. And during construction, the impact to the business can be significant. So I know we'll do everything we can to help still direct people to their businesses and let them know the doors are still open, but those impacts are real. So I just hope that we continue to really take that to heart, and we aren't necessarily going by the book, or this will mitigate it or whatever. We can mitigate all we want, but there are real impacts. Even the cloud of a project like this, or any of our corridors, can put on a business or a property owner is very real. So I'm going to be supporting this, and I really wholeheartedly appreciate that effort that seems to be apparent tonight, that staff will continue to work on mitigating, moving, because I've been in that conversation, and it can be a hard one when you have a very tight corridor or a difficult corridor. So I'll be supporting this, but I really support and want to continue to listen to businesses in these corridors, and everybody in the corridors, but especially because we're hearing businesses and making sure that we aren't putting them out of business.
Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And very, very briefly, just wanted to note for council members who aren't on transportation, one thing we did hear from many of our public commenters, who were all businesses in that particular, was how good our outreach staff had been. And so, I think that it was definitely concerns about the locations, but there was a lot of very positive comments about about the engagement that they've had to date. I think our ABRT program really sort of sets the model for community engagement for the council. I do want to thank the business owners, there's a couple here tonight. I appreciate you guys attending, and like I said, definitely we'll keep talking, and I know our project staff will continue the discussion as well.
Councilmember Wolf, then Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be voting for this, but only because of all of the willingness to continue to work to get those final details right. These are much more permanent stations than our typical bus shelters, and we need to take the time to get it right, because if those aren't figured out by the time we need to do contracts to build it, I will not vote for the actual construction, because we got to get it right before we can begin construction.
Johnson.
And thank you, and I just want to echo what Councilmember Wolf said, because I'm all about the process and getting it right, but if, at the end of the day, you know, I am not at all hesitant to vote no on the final funding of the project. And I just want to highlight, and you all know this by now, I'm sure, but for the newer council members too, you know, we've heard on the testimony at the open meeting section. I don't want to get into that, but you know, our authority is very different here. This is going to be a project that we own and operate, so we have a lot of say in this project, where we don't have as much say when it's not our project. So that's just kind of something I want to. There's a bit of a juxtaposition. Like anything that's happening somewhere where there's change, people, rightfully so, are very concerned. But our authority and what we do is also defined by Minnesota statute. So.
Any other comments, thoughts? Councilmember Bento.
Just to make sure that we all are really committed to this, the Otter Saloon has karaoke from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. every day of the week. I think we should all go there.
That would be including tonight.
That's one of my old hangouts.
Show you all around.
Sorry, I just had to throw that.
Very important that we have that on the record. Thank you, Councilmember.
Anything?
And with that, any other questions, comments, thoughts? Dr. Carter.
Yeah, you know, I know this is a little bit off, but you know, I saw the notice about KMOJ, and that's a strong one for me. So in the same vein, I support them, but even if it wasn't them, any small business I support. My brother's a small businessman, I'm a small businessman. I know it's tough, even when times are good. So I think we have to take an extra 2 or 3 steps and be forthright in what we're doing in terms of that. And I hope that's what we're doing. And my view is to follow your leadership, to follow the governor's leadership. But if, you know, but we have to think in terms of we're champions for people that can't speak for themselves. And the small business people, they're a good example of that. And so if there's ever a time when you step up, that's when I think we would step up if we needed to step up. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you. And thank you for all these comments and sensitivity. For that, I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carried. We're on to a information item, which is the preliminary operating budget and levies presentation. I think Marie Anderson is here. Just remind you that this is going to be a presentation and that we will ultimately come toward approval at a future council meeting. But it really is helpful to have this information today. Welcome, Marie.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and council members. I am Marie Henderson. I'm your deputy CFO here at the council, and today you will hear from finance directors, division leaders about our preliminary 2024 operating budget and levy. This presentation includes financial numbers, but it also will include stories about how the budget dollars are going to be used throughout our region. So while the discussions have happened at the committee's levels, at the division levels, the budget here tonight is the first time you'll see the opportunity to see the whole proposed operating budget as a whole. The preliminary budget is not at its end. and we are just on a step along the way. We have 2 statutory requirements. They are in red. They're a little bit harder to see, but they're September 1st for the adoption of the preliminary budget, and really that's our levy. And at that point, after September 1st, we can lower the levy, but we cannot raise the amount. We can always lower it though. And the second statutory requirement is that we must adopt a final budget with the levy no later than December 20th. So that would be the December 13th council meeting, in which we would adopt both the operating and the capital budget, which we call the unified budget for the council. Our preliminary focus today is going to be our operating budget, which that includes our operations, our pass-through grants, our debt service funds, and our other post-employment benefits, and of course our property tax levy. In October, after discussions have been in place at the committee levels once again, we'll come back and highlight changes to the operating budget. This year we will have a fair amount of the changes from what you'll see tonight, mainly around the transportation and the sales tax amounts that we are still formulating. In October, you will also see then our capital program that will consist of our authorized projects for the year and a 6-year plan that we have proposed spending in 2024. So the authority from this budget comes from statute, which gives the authority of the regional administrator to recommend a budget as required by statute to be submitted by the council for approval. And ultimately, as we go through public comment and final adoption, it becomes the council's budget. So first, I'd really like to focus on our property tax levies for this year. The council has authority in state statute to levy for property tax in the metro area for specific purposes to fund our grant and loan programs, our debt service obligations, and in a limited way, our general purpose levies. We have 2 main sections in our levy. One is a non-debt service levy, and the other one is the debt service levy. The non-debt service levy is limited each year in accordance to government inflation rate called the implicit price deflator. Over the past 10 years, we've seen an average of that rate being around 2%. Some years we've seen less than 1%. Last year when I was here, it was at 8.5%. And this year for 2024, the maximum increase is at a 5.5%. Our debt service levies are not limited by this inflation rate, but for transit and parks, we are limited really by statutory authority granted to issue the debt. Our wastewater debt is secured primarily through wastewater fees, but secondly, the fully faith and credit of the council, though we've never needed to levy for wastewater debt service. We have had and implemented a levy strategy here at the council and have maintained that through the years. We set this strategy to stay prudent with our debt and our expenses here at the council. Our strategy first and foremost is to meet the debt service needs for park and transit. Then secondly, we receive $5 million annually from the fiscal disparity to the tax-based revitalization account. And this program is a tax-based sharing program within the metropolitan area that is funded by commercial and industrial properties, not homeowners. We also have strategy-based decisions around our livable community demonstration account. We have chosen to maximize our general purpose levy and, if possible, hold our overall levy increase to 2% each year. Finally, we do have the ability to levy for highway right-of-way program. Currently, that program has been funded significantly with reserves for the last few years, and we have not had to levy for that. So So when we focus on just the debt service piece of the levy, it's a balance between our debt service levy and our non-debt service levy. But again, with the pressures of the debt service, we have to make sure that we can pay our bills and pay the bonding that we issue for our parks and transit. So we have to cover those first. Through the years, we have been able to hold our levy, like I said, at 2%. In 2020, we actually held it flat. But all the other years, it's been 2%. Puts pressure then on the non-debt service levy part of our levy. Part of our non-debt levy section is the tax revitalization, the fiscal disparity, at $5 million that we received from the fiscal disparity program. Livable Community Demonstration Account has been growing by the general implicit price deflator, which again this year is 5.5%. For 2024, the levy proposed is $14.9 million for livable communities. By maximizing this levy, the strategy is to create a transit-oriented development component within the Livable Communities Demonstration Account grant program. And this is used to fund the demonstration account program and a transit-oriented development program along with the required statute funding for local housing incentive account. Another component is our general purpose. This is our most flexible dollars that we do have at the council, but within statutory requirements. Primarily, the general purpose levy is used for community development administration and our HRA administration. We also have statutory requirements to transfer to local housing incentive account. This year, it leaves around $3 million into the general purpose levy. Currently, we are proposing to place that in for the targeted initiative of technology into the systems that are needed to upgrade across the council. So we put this all together and we put the numbers then associated with this. Last year we proposed a levy of $92.32 million. That 2% increase brings it to 94.7, with the two different elements of the non-debt service levies and then of course covering our debt service levies. Our levy is shared across the 7-county metro area, except transit debt service levy, which is shared by a smaller area served by our transit service. This map highlights the metro area and transit taxing areas. So when we put this all together, what's the impact of the taxpayers? And here we have a $300,000 market value home in the area, with all things being equal year over year, and acknowledging that each individual taxpayer will have different experiences depending on factors of increasing. But on average, our levy will cost taxpayer transit tax inside authority of $56.70 and outside $22.79. Putting it in one more other perspective of the impact of our levy across the council with counties, cities, and school districts, we're 1.3% of the tax dollar. And a little bit more perspective, I started with the council over 9 years ago, and that was well over 2%. So we actually, by holding our levy at 2% throughout the years, are actually receiving a shrinking share of the tax levy. That is the proposed tax levy for 2024. I'd like to turn over to talking about our operating budget for 2024. We'll start with an overall look at our operating budget, and then each of the divisions are here to present their portion of the budget. In 2024, the proposed operating budget is a $1.37 billion operating budget, and this represents a 5% increase from last year, which is $65 million, which is really in line with inflation also. The left side of this slide, the budget is broken down between our operating, our pass-through grants, our debt service, and our other post-employment benefits, correspondingly from 23 to 24. Our other post-employment benefit plan, or our OPEB plan, is a closed plan, and it funds reflect our fully funded status on this retiree healthcare liability and the earnings of the OPEB fund balance to pay our retiree medical premiums. Our OPEB plan fund is managed by the State Board of Investment. Through the years that we've managed this account to stay fully funded, it is more than 100%. And that allows us for in economies, especially the ones that we've just gone through, that we still remain fully funded. I'm proud to say that that plan is still fully funded. Our pass-through funding is relatively stable year over year. And changes primarily reflect the timing of the drawdowns and disbursements of grant fundings in communities to complete their projects. We've already talked about the debt service pressures and keeping the levy at 2%. And on the right side of the chart is where we have the changeover year for our operating budget of $67 million increase, or 7% from prior year adopted budget. Salaries and benefits represent about 58% of our operating budget. This increase is about $34 million over last year's, or 4% from the adopted budget from 23 to 24. The $13 million increase in contracted services is mainly due to higher provider contractor rates. And the $20 million in other represents higher fuel, chemicals for environmental services, bus parts, and utilities, especially gas and electric. Putting this all together, the proposed budget pie charts here show by division and by sources of our operating budget. The left side pie chart shows the budget breakout by division. And I'll note that RA, or Regional Administration, is mostly allocated and reflected in the division's budgets. The biggest story about the budget is the pie chart on the right side of the slide regarding the sources of funding for the budget. The federal funds on this pie chart decreased 13% year over year, mainly due to the use of the pandemic federal fund reliefs and funds that we have drawn down. And the federal sourcing funds are still higher than pre-pandemic levels. For context, in 2020, the budget included only $107 million from federal funds. Motor vehicle sales tax, or MVEST, is forecasted at $359 million, which is in line with prior years. And we'll adjust the budget before final budget once we receive from the state the November forecast. Property taxes support about 7% of our operating budget. So again, that levy only is supporting about 7% of our operating budget. And that is to cover our debt service and the grant programs. The other income of $15.5 million is primarily from investment income on our OPEB plan. We have planned use of reserves in operations of $124 million. That is the drawdown of, we have, and Transit will talk a little bit more about this. We have planned use of these reserves. These are the federal funds that we drew in, and we will plan on using them in 24. I'd also like to point out that the regional sales tax on this graph is part of Metro Transit's budget, and it's the swap out because of legislation change of local revenue that would have been for light rail and commuter rail to the communities, and the relief of those communities paying us and us using sales tax. Other sales tax funds will be plugged into this budget before the public comment in October, and that's when we'll be back here to talk more about that. Also tonight, Transit will be talking more about the use of the sales tax. And you'll keep hearing more about that at the committee level. All of this budget is a proposed a full-time equivalent of 4,488 employees to cover on this budget. This is flat from last year. Turning real quickly to the general fund then operations as we start talking about the divisions that we have here at the council. The total general fund operation proposed budget is 116 million, and that's up from last year of 7.2 million. The funding sources for the general fund are the general purpose levy, and the allocations to the divisions in which is mainly interest. The pie chart on the left, you'll see the uses by department. It includes activities for regional administration and community development. There's also statutory requirements for housing incentive account each year and water supply transfer to environmental services. And like I said earlier, the balance of around that $3 million has helped to fund future investment for the technology infrastructure here at the council. The pie chart on the right is the uses by category. The largest category is salaries and benefits at 55%, along with contracted services at 29%. We are always prudent with our reserves, and the general fund has assigned revenue or reserves above the target of $12 million as proposed, and our target is $10 million. Still staying within making sure that we have our reserve target balances, and target balances are used for, they're usually about 2 to 3 months worth of reserves in case of any extraordinary items happen. With that, showing the regional administration then at 97.7 million. And this graph is showing the uses by department. Regional administration is subdivided into 4 functional categories, which include administrative services, includes the management of the overall council decision-making process, including finance, legal, government agencies, and so our council and our audit department. Business services includes communications, community relations, HR, and retention of employees. And lastly, informational systems, providing computer services and geographic information services to council segments. The general fund budget is more than 57% salaries, and again, contracted services making the second largest at 32%. The far right pie chart shows the RA allocation, and again, the divisions pay for the shared services of regional administration, and that's included in their budgets that you'll see here shortly. And with that, I'll take community development.
Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. It's my pleasure to be before you this morning. I'm Lisa, this afternoon. Here, you can have some more coffee. Right, I'm Lisa Barajas, Executive Director of the Community Development Division, and I'm joined by Nick Hendrickson this afternoon to talk about our budget as well. I'll kick us off a little bit just as a reminder, especially for our newer council members, about the work that community development does because of the broad range of activities that we have underway or that we're responsible for. We do everything from guiding growth and development of the region and long-range planning to working with regional parks implementing agencies to plan for and fund the regional parks and trail system. We provide lots of technical assistance, so you hear about a lot of the tools that we develop and provide for local governments to support them in implementing regional policies as part of their local efforts. We, as you know, deliver state and federally funded rent assistance programs through our Metro HRA, which is about half of our staff and half of our work within community development. And then, of course, the Livable Communities Act grants that we also are responsible for working with you all as policymakers on distributing those funds around the region for competitive grants. And then, of course, a significant amount of research that really supports all of these efforts within a division, as well as efforts across the council around especially planning functions and trends in the region, and working with our partners in the various divisions about how those research efforts support their planning efforts as well. And then as a foundation for all of that, a whole lot of community collaboration and convening around issues of regional importance that local governments are bringing to us as being important, that you all are identifying as issues of importance as well, and also related to some of the other activities we have underway, like our recently awarded grant from the Environmental Protection Agency to create a greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan with other governments within the region. So I just wanted to start off with just some accomplishments that we've been able to just have underway just this year with the investments that you've made in community development for our 2023 budget. And really a lot of our work this year, as you know, is focused around our long-range planning efforts, which include a lot of engagement activities around the region, and doing engagement in ways that are not typical for our work, and trying different ways of reaching voices and folks who aren't typically involved in our planning processes. So you can see on this slide are just some examples of our recent work, including engagement that our housing policy folks have been leading with, underrepresented voices on the upper right-hand side. This is a class of English language learners that we were meeting with to talk about their housing needs in the region. As you can see on the lower right, our greenhouse gas strategy planning tool, which we recently presented to you as part of our launch, is a really exemplar type of activity that we do with our research and our planning activities together to bring resources to local units of government to support their efforts. On the bottom middle is an example of some of the work we do in partnership with universities and colleges within the region to bring meaningful experiences to young career folks, or folks who are beginning to explore what their careers might be while they're still in college, and having them lead some of our efforts at the council, and giving them real-world professional experiences, but they also bring new energy and perspectives to our work. These students in particular were helping to bring, doing interviews and humanizing and bringing stories to some of our extreme heat work that Eric Wycheck presented to earlier this year. Of course, our gray and shade tool on the lower left, and on the upper left, I think Councilmember Vento will recognize herself in that particular event, but our Parks Ambassador program, and working with our parks agencies around the region to bring arts to our parks and to help create spaces where people, all residents of our region, feel that they see themselves in our parks and feel like those spaces are welcoming to them. So this is a great partnership with Ramsey County. Really excited, and really just exemplary of some of the work that our staff are leading. A lot of our budget, actually most of CD's budget is staff, because our staff lead our work, implement the work, and do that work in hand. So what we have queued up for 2024 really is continuing that work around our 2050 Regional Development Guide, around Imagine 2050. The 6 images you see on the slide are actually past plans. So hopefully soon, next year, you'll see the image of our next plan, our 2050 plan, on their slides that we've been able to share. But a lot of our activities are really associated with both the staff to do that work, as well as all of the engagement activities and research that we have queued up to support your conversations and bring that information to you to help develop those policies and set the direction for our next regional plan. So as I mentioned, the local government engagements as well as broader engagements, that's a little bit limiting. We are doing broader engagement, not just with local government partners. Our Regional Parks Equity Grant Program, which you'll hear more about later this year, we'll be launching that 3rd round in this next calendar year. Our Parks Ambassador program, as I mentioned previously, but continue to work on implementing the Council's Climate Action Work Plan, which in community development I'm the executive sponsor for, but that's an interdivisional team of staff from across the Council that work on implementation. Just the funding sits in community development's budget, but it's the coordination team that designates which projects we're going to take on and what else we need to do to implement that plan. I'll talk a little bit more about our residential preferences study in an upcoming slide. But additional work we do, as you know, are a lot of our annual reporting, our population and employment estimates, really moving to a more people-centered data, and our approach is really following the direction that we've heard from you all. And of course, our climate pollution reduction grant, which I mentioned previously. These are just some of the big things. There's a lot of everyday activity that goes under this as well. I wanted to spend a little bit of time on our Metro HRA just because it is a little bit different in its funding sources, and when some of our conversations happen aren't quite aligned with our council's calendar year because we are on a federal congressional appropriation timeline, which is unpredictable and variable year to year. We don't always know what we're going to get and when we're going to get it, but we do know that some of the things that we need to do related to setting our budget for 2024 relate to the rent subsidies and setting our fair market rents for that. We have to do, we cannot set our fair market rents until we hear from HUD what our range of possibilities are, and we don't hear from them until later this fall. So that is one change that you can expect to see from us as before we come to your final budget later this year, is setting that particular fair market rent standards, because our per unit cost, which you see a chart on here, this is how much we pay per household as a housing subsidy, and it has been increasing by nearly 2% each month just in the calendar year of 2023 alone. We've jumped up and up and up, and even since I started in this role 5 years ago, I think our per unit cost was something like $630, and now we're up to $980. Now, that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you serve over 7,000 households on a monthly basis, you start multiplying that up, and it has a big impact. And we only get this much of an appropriation from Congress, and we have to work within it. So it really impacts how many households we can serve, how much we're, and where that choice is for local, for households when we set those rents. So especially for our new members, I want to be sure that you have that on your radar as well. We'll dive deeper into this conversation in Community Development Committee when we get our federal standards from HUD around what our fair market rent should be, or at least that range that we need to operate within, and bring that financial analysis impact to you all for your consideration and direction on how we set those rents. But kind of moving up to the top of this slide, we are continuing our work on the residential preferences study that we have underway. This is in partnership with the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority and the St. Paul Public Housing Authority. And this will really help us to truly understand what voucher holders need from our Housing Choice Voucher Program, and what really influences their choices on where they want to live, where they choose to move, what they're looking for as they're looking for places to move. You know, we have a lot of anecdotal information just from our experience and our staff experience over the years, but really wanting to document that. We hear a lot from national and academic studies about how households do better in these kind of longitudinal studies, but we haven't heard it from the household perspective themselves and what actually influences them to where they would like to live and what they need for their own household success. And other things that we want to analyze as part of this study after we continue to gather those preferences is really how do race, ethnicity, immigration status, household size, disability status, and other factors like that inform outcomes or barriers for those choices for our participants in the Housing Authority. We also continue to do work around exploring pathways to home ownership and building wealth with our participants. And I know Stephanie Paulson and Terry Smith were here just before you last week and talked about some of the work that they have underway in that effort, using going through our federally funded programs to explore the self-sufficiency program and other home ownership opportunities within that. There's a lot to unpack in there, and I know they'll be back in front of me to talk more about their findings. And then finally, as we've talked about a couple of times over the last couple of weeks, we do know that the rent assistance program that is state funded will be on our radar as something that the council will be eligible for to apply for. We don't know how much money that will be, admin costs and voucher costs associated with that. So that was something that we would expect would come through. We haven't built that into our budget per se, but it's something that we know will be a change that we'll be looking for, and even the timing on that is questionable. So likely would probably come well into our 24 budget as a budget amendment, unless they surprise us and really speed it along, but I don't expect that to occur at this point. So just wanted to give you that background on some of those big picture items that you can expect to hear more about over the course of this year and into early next year that will impact our budget and how we approach not just our programs, but how we some policy choices that you might have in front of you that will impact how we spend the funds available to us. I'll turn it over to Nick for the upcoming
Great,
slides.
yeah, thanks Lisa. Good evening, Mr. Chair and council members. My name is Nick Hendrickson. I'm the budget manager for CD and MTS. And so now we're going to focus on some financials. So this slide is focuses on the CD operating budget. And here we have a $27.3 million operating budget. When you look at the uses by department, 14.3 million is for community development and 12 million is for HRA operations. The remaining 1 million is a transfer to the Livable Communities Local Housing Incentives account. And if we break it down even further and look at the uses by category, you can see that the majority of the expenses, 14.8 million, are for salary and benefits, which is for our staff to carry out the responsibilities related to planning, research, housing, parks, and other duties. 5.5 million is for contracted services, and this is made up of a number of major and small projects, and Lisa did give some of those examples, but just as give a few more, it's the 2050 Regional Development Guide, Climate Action Plan implementation, Parks Visitor Study follow-up, and community engagement and policy plan updates, just to name a few. 3.7 million is from regionally allocated costs, and these are central support costs that are billed back to the divisions for support services such as human resources, IS, and communications, for example. In the other category, we have 2.3 million. This is mainly general administrative costs to carry out the day-to-day activities. And again, we have the 1 million statutory transfer to the Livable Communities Local Housing Incentives account. This slide is showing the sources of funding for community development's operations. We have 8 million in federal funds, and these are administration fees from HUD to administer the Housing Choice Voucher Program. 15.9 million is from the council's general fund. And in the other category, we have 3.4 million, and this is mainly rental income from the Family Affordable Housing Program and a small other miscellaneous revenue. And this slide focuses on the community development's pass-through budget. Here we have a $133.6 million pass-through budget. And when we look at the uses by department, 34.4 million is for livable communities and 11.5 million is for parks. And these funds are passed through to local communities and the parks implementing agencies via our grant programs. And 87.7 million is for the HRA Housing Assistance Program. And for the sources by category, 87.4 million is HUD federal pass-through revenue for the HRA Housing Assistance Program. 11.8 million in state revenues is for parks pass-through and the Housing Trust Fund. 14.9 million is property tax for the Livable Communities Demonstration Account. 5 million in property taxes for the Livable Communities Tax Base Revitalization Account. And again, the 1 million statutory transfer for the Livable Communities Local Housing Incentives Account. And then the 13.5 million use of reserves actually comes from the Livable Communities Fund balance. And so each year we conduct a cash flow analysis on prior grants that have been awarded and to estimate the amount of pass-through expense we will have in each given year. And now I can turn it over to environmental services.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, do you want to?
Maybe it's the question, don't
Is reserves required under the law or is it a guidance under the council?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Delcar, the reserve balance that we're using is actually from the Livable Communities grant program itself, so we levy an amount, but we don't give those grants out 100%. It's on a spending basis, so they sit in our balance accounts and until they're needed to be paid out as per the grant agreements that we have for those particular grants. Other reserve balances that we have in, like for the HRA, are by council policy.
Thank you.
Any other questions for community development? All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Welcome, Lisa and Ned.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. I'm Lisa Thompson, General Manager of Environmental Services, and I'm joined with Ned Smith, who's our Director of Finance for Environmental Services. And we're bringing you some exciting numbers. What you have before you today is a budget that provides environmental services the resources to continue serving the region in a manner that supports our vision of clean water for future generations. The colors represent our water resource recovery services. You may recall, we used to call them wastewater treatment plants. We're calling them water resource recovery facilities now. And there's 9 of them throughout the region. To appreciate the scale of the service that we provide, you can refer to the numbers on the right. Many of you have seen that probably multiple times, but I think a nice way to kind of think of it is that we serve approximately half the state of Minnesota. And while we operate explicitly to make sure we never interrupt that service, think of half of the state being upset if we did. So we're never going to let that happen. I'm not trying to give you bad dreams. Our mission is to partner, plan, and provide services to protect the region's water. And that's an update to our mission that we did a year ago. And it's a very important update, I think, that we are living into a broader mission in terms of protecting the water. So our origin purpose is to treat wastewater. And we've developed a legacy of doing that exceptionally well and reliably. So the Platinum Compliance Awards that are a national award our facilities are receiving for continued compliance performance is a good example of how we can measure our quality of our service that we deliver. What these awards don't show, though, is the excellence that we provide in service to the common interests of protecting the region's water. And that's where we're living into this mission of partnering, planning, and providing. So water is essential to all life. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. And our water resources are essential also to our region being a great place to live, play, and do business. But there are challenges with this remaining true in the future, and it will require partnering with others to address those challenges. Those partnerships, or alliances, if you will, start with sharing good information and facts to aid good planning, and sharing of ideas and connecting those ideas so that we can develop multi-solution approaches and collaborative decisions. This is the work we are living into with our purpose, living it in new ways. Our water professionals are not only good scientists, they're becoming skilled at convening and facilitating conversations to enable those possibilities. These graphics illustrate how we have grown and continue to develop more connecting efforts in the region. We are focused on becoming a valued Met Council partner as parts of the region are already facing water challenges. And we're there to work with them, help them understand the situation, sometimes bring dollars or combine support to meet those needs so that they can be better addressed collaboratively than they would be able to be done alone. We're committed to this approach. We are going to be the salted nut roll of regional development. And most of you have heard my story. If you haven't, check with me afterwards. But I think that's as good a reason as any to hand out salted nut rolls to you. As I transition it over to Ned.
Oh my.
Just to note, council members, in previous meetings, you should eat them or open them away from the microphones because those watching online have been texting me saying it gets a little loud.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, members of the council. I'm glad Lisa has passed these out because this is the most important slide, so hopefully you'll be distracted. I do want to, so these are the highlights. This is the executive summary of our budget, and it really has to do with where our money comes from. I always like to say and remind everyone we are a fee-for-service agency. I like to say you flush, you pay, you don't flush, you don't pay. We don't take any tax money, we don't take any federal, state, or council dollars outside of our planning, water supply planning function. But in terms of operation, rehabilitation, and maintenance of the system, we are purely fee-for-service. So this is where we get our money. Our municipal wastewater charge is the wholesale charge. We charge to 111 customer communities. That's going to be growing 6.8% for 2024 for a total of $281.6 million. That is the highest number I've seen in 9 years I've been here. And that's because of the unprecedented inflation we've seen. Those of you who are in management committee today heard about inflation we're seeing in our chemicals and utilities and also in our materials. I think all the businesses are facing it. I can say a couple things. One is no city actually sees that 6.8% because their rate is also determined by their flow and what percent of the flow they are for the total region. So no one actually sees 6.8%. Sometimes their flow is a bigger driver. However, when we presented that to the over 100 people that saw in our customer communities, nobody blinked an eye. Many of the public works directors, city managers, they were all feeling those same pressures. They wanted to know what we were doing to manage it, and we are working on efficiency and trying to figure out ways to save money on utilities and chemicals, and we'll continue those efforts. But we do have to flow with that for 2024. I'm always encouraged. Every night before the next inflation number comes out, I stay up and like a kid on Christmas Eve. So far, it's been good news. Every month it comes down. I don't know if that'll mean some of our commodities will actually drop in price. I imagine many will stay steady, as will utilities, but it's encouraging to see it out of the 9% range and more in the 3% range. In terms of sewer availability charge, that is our one-time connection fee for new or expanding development for a building or a house. That's going to stay flat because of continuing development, and I'll show you in a little bit what those trends are. But SAC is used for that's called to pay for a portion of our debt service. It's basically you figure out what percent of your system is empty, and that's what SAC pays for. And it's because we build it bigger than we need to, so to allow for growth. So we only charge current users for what they're using, and the growth portion that we grow into is paid for with development. So that's $57.8 million. It's about a third of our debt service. And then industrial wastewater strength charge is pegged pretty closely to our municipal wastewater charge. Those are the fees that we charge to our industrial dischargers who send us strength that is stronger than domestic. Domestic being what you and I normally would flush. They send down, best example is a food processor. They might be sending us skins or leftover milk or cheese curds or things like, not cheese curds, excuse me, whey, that comes off of processing food. We do have one that actually has sent us cheese curds and it didn't go well and we're working on that. And then we also have industrial waste permit fee, which is, so in addition to paying strength charge, our 940 roughly industrial permittees each have a permit that covers our administrative expense for maintaining those permits. In terms of uses by department and uses by category, everything looks not surprising. Our number one use is treatment services. That's another word for our plants. That is our largest group of people, and that's also our largest concentration of assets. It's a little deceiving to see second is administration, but administration includes all of our regional administration services, especially IT and IS. So that's where our computers are. We don't, our services, we don't allocate that out to the individual groups. So that's why administration looks so big, but that is some very critical parts of our operations. After that is interceptors. Interceptors is the word for our pipes that are out in the region. That's what collects the wastewater from our city partners and transfers it to our plants. Support services are the people that help and optimize the treatment services and the interceptors. So that's some of our internal computing groups, that's our process groups that figures out how it's the best way, optimizing how we do our treatment. Labs are in there, and then maintenance services is folks that go around and fix the pipes, fix the plants, including their materials and supplies. Water resources planning is what Lisa was alluding to with those maps. That's where we partner with our communities to ensure that we can provide the water that our partners can provide the water supply for a growing region. And then utility management systems is mostly our long-range planning, as well as additional water quality monitoring. In terms of what that means by category, our number one investment is our people and our salaries and benefits. As you saw up there, we're at about 674. We've been growing about 1% to 2% since as long as I've been here. But we always like to remember that back in the 90s, we had over 1,200 employees. So we're still a little bit over half. So we've continued to enjoy efficiencies. The rest of these are pretty much spread out evenly. I would call out year over year. This would look pretty similar. I think you would see contracted services, materials and supplies, and utilities have bumped up a little bit because of the inflation that we are seeing, around 1% or 2%, because of the inflation we're seeing in our chemicals, utilities, and supplies. Our sources, this looks a little different than what some of you might have seen in some previous. That's because we are not including debt service. This is considered the operating budget. Our debt service is around 150 to 160 million a year. So that is backed out of this number. But you can see our number one source of fund, is municipal wastewater charges at about 85%. So again, that's the wholesale charge that we charge to our 111 customer services. And then our industrial waste fees are about 9%. So that again is for permitting and for strength. And then other can be appropriations, usually pass through special grants, either from the Clean Water Fund. That also includes our water supply planning funds that we receive from the levy. And again, Clean Water Legacy funds that also help us with our water supply planning. But it's important to know that we count on our customers. And again, we're growing at about 6.8%. Sewer availability charge, again, that's about a third of our debt service. So about $50 to $60 million a year. You can see the growth has been phenomenal since 2009. That has been mostly driven by strong residential growth. We even in the pandemic, you could see a little dip there in 2020 and 2021. But the dip was in commercial, so businesses. Residential was still booming throughout all that. Those of you who were in management committee today saw the dramatic drop off. We're expecting about 16,000 units for 2023. So the rising interest rates have finally caught up to us. Residential has dropped off by about 60%. Commercial has dropped off by about 15 to 20%. Oh my goodness, aren't we frightened? No, we're not frightened at all, because our reserve is at $137 million versus our council minimum policy of about $55 million. We knew this was coming. We knew there would be a slowdown. And so because we have this healthy reserve, that we're predicting to go through about 20 million for 2023. So at that rate, we can weather a 4-year leveling off of SAC activity before we need to even think about raising the SAC rate, because you really don't want to do that during a recession. So not only is it hard to build, and then to make it more expensive to build. So we're going to do everything we can to use our reserve that we can keep our SAC rates flat. And that is environmental services. So I will turn it over to transportation.
Any questions? All right, I have one question that came up in a meeting of the task force studying Met Council governance, and a council member from the city of Minneapolis made a pretty strong statement, and I wish you were there to answer it. So, because I think it's a question about SAC charges and how irresponsible Met Council is, and how we need constituents to come to them, because you were charging more SAC charges for expanding a restaurant into outdoor eating but there weren't more tables, it was just there were more capacity. In other words, same number of people, but they're gonna be eating outdoors, and that this was really unfair. So, and I'm sorry to be putting this to you live, but give you a chance to actually answer that.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I get that about every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So I don't want to call out specific businesses, but it's most effective. Think of Maynard's or Lord Fletcher's on a Sunday afternoon at 5 o'clock when it's 70 degrees. Think of Kieran's Irish Pub when the St. Patrick's Day falls on a Saturday and it's 70 degrees out. I can assure you they are completely full indoors and out. Now we do offer a 25% discount on our outdoor seating because we acknowledge that when it rains, our system is under less stress, and when it rains, you can't eat outside. So outdoor seating is 1/4 of the price of indoor seating, but SAC is about the busiest day of the year. So it has to be ready for even that Kieran's, that probably happens that one, well, Kieran's probably having more than that on a beautiful day. Any one of those though, there might be 3 days a year that happens. But if we don't have the capacity ready for that most busy day, then you get a backup in the basement.
So SAC charges builds out the top rate capacity.
It is trying to plan for the busiest day of the year, even if that only happens 1 day a year.
Thank you. I think we're better prepared when somebody makes those comments because we've just heard the answer. Wendy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to expand upon that. The SAC for patios used to be the same as the SAC for inside the building. And that was something I worked on in 2009 when I first came to the council, was fixing that because it really wasn't reflective of the need and was kind of thwarting the construction of those patios. And the construction of patios boomed after we fixed that. So we actually took in more revenue because there were more patios being constructed. But it still fairly allocates with everybody else, because if you didn't charge anything, somebody else in the system has to pay more to make up for that. And we can't do that. We've got to treat everybody.
And we apply our policies consistently.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was also listening this morning, so just to follow up also, when I first came on council, we did take a lot of calls about SAC. But then a few years ago, Councilmember Wolf chaired a task force to revise the policy and simplify it. And I can tell you that in that time, I don't know if I've actually had a call other than one. I believe Wendy and I arrived at the business and found out it was already taken care of. So it's really become a much more straightforward process than it used to.
They call me the SAC lady.
The call I had was from a friend who had a car dealer, and he said, nobody knew about our car wash, and now that they know about it because we're expanding it, I can't believe we have to pay SAC charges. And I said, so what you're saying is you didn't pay for something you thought you had to pay, and now that you found out, you think it's not fair that you should pay what everybody else pays. Is that it? Well, yeah, but you're my friend. I said, sorry, that doesn't get you very much. Anyway.
And Mr. I mean, just ultimately, I have not gotten any either. I'm a city person like some of y'all are, and I would be getting them if there were issues right now, I would only imagine. And I would say too, it's really about the end user who's enjoying the restaurant, because they're the ones too that are inducing the, flow down the sewer. So it all gets paid by a consumer somewhere, because we're moving about. I don't just stay in my development where my sewer access charges are included in our bill. So we are all happy to testify to the committee that's looking at our governance on that.
We may have that opportunity.
Our approach is to serve 100% of the time, not just average.
Good comment. All right, we had to hear from Jazz Petition. Oh, sorry. Rita, go ahead.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, I know with the pandemic, we had an increase in outdoor seating. Has that had an impact on our revenue?
Mr. Chair and members of the council, no, it did not, because we suspended outdoor seating charges during the pandemic. So as long as the governor's order was in place
that said you can't eat indoors, you have to be outdoors, we suspended the charging of SAC. And then when the governor's order was lifted, we checked back in with the cities and said, if anyone wants to make that permanent, then we need to pay for it. But if they're done now that the pandemic's over, there was no charge.
Which I think goes
great
directly to the question that might have been asked.
That's really interesting. I appreciate that thorough explanation. Well, thanks, Lisa and Ned. Really great presentation. And welcome, Leslie and Charles.
Good evening, good afternoon, council members and Mr. Chair. Charles Carlson, Executive Director for MTS. We do not have nut rolls for you, but if you use on your badge, you can use it for unlimited travel on I'll turn it to the GM to introduce transportation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. My name is Leslie Canderas, Metro Transit General Manager. I'm joined by Ed Petrie, our Director of Finance, as well as Nick Hendrickson, you've already heard from earlier today. And Nick and Ed will be presenting the Transportation Division slides, which cover both Metro Transit and Metropolitan Transportation Services budget. But before I hand it over to Ed and Nick, I just wanted to note that as we look towards 2024, part of our work next year is really to continue to build on some of our recent successes. We're seeing improvements in operator hiring, which is also allowing us to improve our service levels, including on August 19th during our quarterly service changes, we'll again be adding back service. Transit ridership is up. Compared to 2022, we're getting near 20% higher ridership. And we're also making headway in our efforts to improve the customer experience. And last week you received an update from Metro Transit on the Safety and Security Action Plan work. This preliminary operating budget will continue to build on those investments, including our work to increase official presence on the system. That means hiring officers and community service officers, continuing to contract with supplemental security and community-based organizations, and also establishing the Transit Rider Investment Program. And finally, as you'll hear in our presentation, MTS and Metro Transit, along with regional administration, are analyzing the impacts of the new regional sales tax for transportation that will go into effect on October 1st. The Metropolitan Council has long sought reliable, ongoing source of funding for transit, and the sales tax will allow us to make longer-range plans to build, operate, and maintain a transit system that will serve our region well. So you'll see in the following slides that the work to integrate the new sales tax revenue into the 2024 operating budget is still underway, and we'll have more information about sales tax implementation in the coming months as you prepare to release the draft public comment budget this fall. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Petrie.
Thank you, Leslie. Chair committee members, once again, Ed Petrie, I'm Director of Finance at Metro Transit. I'll go through some of the budget development information on Metro Transit, then we'll talk numbers, and we'll start with that. First of all, some of the policies and actions that the council has for the development of our budgets. First of all, we have the annual service plans. With our annual service plans, we're looking at the markets, we're looking at ridership, and this is something that we're looking at more than what we historically have done because of the pandemic and as we're coming back. We're watching the market demands, we're looking at the peak period, off-peak period, and noticing trends and changes within our market. So we're trying to put the service out there, because historically we'd always have a morning period and an afternoon period, a peak period, and then a little later during the day. We're seeing that trends with our ridership and with our ridership demand, a lot of it is kind of equal over the day, not as much of the peak periods. So that's one of the things we're actually looking at, our service and the type of service we're offering and trying to adjust it to meet that future or that current market demand. Labor agreements, we have multiple labor agreements with ATU, TMSA, LELS, ASME, non-rep. All of the labor agreements, we've worked with the human resources, we've got preliminary numbers. Those numbers are developed and put into our budgets today. As you're aware, we're currently under negotiations right now with the ATU. We have preliminary numbers in the budget. As that continues, those adjustments may happen within the budget going forward. Fare policy. One of the things that the council does is the council actually sets fare policy. It's a regional fare policy. It's for Metro Transit services, bus, light rail, commuter rail, for MTS services, Metro Mobility, but also for all the suburban providers. We have a regional fare policy, so the council sets that fare policy across the region. We have a target fund balance that we work against. Basically, for example, the Metro Transit family of operations, it's 8.3% of our operating expenses, 1 month expense. So as Maria had talked about earlier, we're doing very good with our fund balance. All of our funds are in excess of the fund balance target policy set by the council. Federal COVID relief, I'll talk about that in a few slides coming. But with federal COVID relief funds, I think you recall the council was a recipient of 3 different lettings of COVID relief funds totaling $725 million. That was the CARES, CRISA, and the ARP funds. We are planning to spend, I believe it's around $64 million in the budget this year and for 2024, and then we will expend the balance in late 24 or early 2025. The final item that Leslie mentioned is the Metropolitan Transportation Sales Tax. It says the words up here, in progress. The work on that, we'll go into that in a few slides here, but the work on that is very much in progress. We have a few dollars that I'll talk about that are in the proposed budget this evening for the sales tax, but we're doing a lot of additional work to identify what additional items that we're going to spend those dollars on. So between now and when we come back for the public hearing draft, that will be one of the items that will change within the budget between now and our public hearing draft. Some of the forecasts and legislation that we have with the legislatures, first of all, some of our forecasts that we have, first of all, is we do our forecast, we do a multi-year plan. We do not only, we do the first year and then a 4-year look forward. We basically go out 2 bienniums because we look at the fact is that if there's anything that we need to do, any changes that we need to do, it takes time to make changes. Whether if we have to adjust service and adjust fares, any of those types of items require time. Some of them require federal approval to make changes that we have to do. One of the big things, one of the big wins for the council was a couple years ago is Metro Mobility became a separate state program. So starting in state fiscal year 2026, Metro Mobility will be then funded by the state of Minnesota. So that was a major improvement within our transportation division. Some of the other financial considerations that we'll talk about in a few minutes is we have state general fund appropriations that we received from the legislature. That is for our rail services and Metro Mobility. We have our motor vehicle sales tax, which is funding that we get from the state of Minnesota. Motor vehicle sales tax, generally we get 2 forecasts, one in February and one in November of each year. Our preliminary budgets are based upon the February forecast. Before we set the budget though, in December, we will have a November forecast. So that will be one change that will happen between tonight's proposal and when we adopt the budget or recommend adopting the budget in December, because we will have the November forecast. As we talked about, we are using federal relief funds. We're continually looking at our financial outlook more now than ever because of the use of the one-time federal relief funds, bringing in the sales tax, but also watching our ridership and our ridership population very closely. Within our multi-year forecast, we have many assumptions built in there for ridership and ridership recovery. So that's one of the main things that we're going to be watching very, very closely over the next few years as ridership does come back. And as we'll talk about in a few minutes, the Metropolitan Area Sales Tax that we received with the past legislature. So let's move into that. The Metropolitan Area Sales Tax, within our preliminary budget this evening, first of all, we have set in here, I believe it's just over $49 million identified today. What that is replacing the county's share for the light rail lines, the commuter rail and Orange Line. So that would be the county shares for the counties of the Hennepin County, Ramsey County, Anoka County, and Dakota County. So for their share of the blue line, the green line, North Star, and the orange line, we've replaced that now with the state sales tax. One of the things you'll note here that says that we've done a lot of extensive work, we're actually taking the sales tax, we're actually doing forecasting out to year 2053, we're pushing it out 30 years. So we're not only looking at the operating funding of our current operations, any of the new lines we're bringing on, whether it's a light rail line, a ABRT, or a BRT line, we're also forecasting out our current capital needs that we have for our existing lines, also forecasting out the current capital future needs for the future lines, but also the capital maintenance. One of the things the reason we're pushing out also 2053 is, as you think about it, I always think that our light rail lines are brand new. But during this 30-year horizon, we're going to be replacing a number of rail cars in the 2030s and in the 2040s because they have a 31-year life. So as you start thinking about replacing the blue line vehicles, the green line vehicles, it's a lot of money. So that's one of the things that we have to, that'll be on the council for the future. So that's one of the things we need to plan for not only today, but plan for that future expenditure and that capital maintenance for all those lines. In addition to all the catenary, the track, all those types of items. So as I mentioned, we're doing a lot of analysis. Also within the legislation, there are 13 uses, additional uses of the sales tax. So working with Charles and Leslie and other folks, we're actually looking at those and identifying how many or what we're going to be spending on those uses. The bottom line I can tell you that with certainty is that we're in progress. What we're proposing this evening will change between now and the public hearing draft that we propose in October. But also as we open this up more through 2024, as we do additional analysis, I would anticipate we'll bring forward additional budget amendments next year in 2024, bringing in additional funds as we're identifying additional needs. So let's talk about the sales tax. As we talked about, it is a 3/4 cent sales tax. It begins October 1st, 2023. 17% of it goes to the counties, as we talked about. 83% will come to the council. Of the 83%, 5% will go to active transportation, but 95% of it will come to us for transit operations, capital, long-term capital maintenance. It's going to generate quite a bit of money. We're anticipating in state fiscal year 24, which will start October 1st through June 30th of 24. It'll generate just over $300 million. The next state fiscal year, just over $465 million. So this is a fund. We have been working very hard to get a dedicated transit source of funding for many, many years. So we are very, very happy that that we have been awarded this. One of the big things, the final point here is, this does, like we said, it ends the funding contributions with Hennepin, Ramsey, Anoka, Dakota counties for the Blue, Green, North Star, and Dakota lines. And this will, like I said, it'll be used to fund future transit operations, maintenance, and the capital projects. Some of the other standard sales tax or standard revenues that we've had is motor vehicle sales tax, state appropriations. Motor vehicle sales tax, as I mentioned, we get a forecast in February and November. One of the things with motor vehicle sales tax is it's a volatile source of revenue. As the economy ebbs and flows, so does motor vehicle sales tax, because if the economy goes down, people generally will hold their vehicles longer and will replace them once the economy starts to return. One of the things that the council that they decided to do when we went onto this revenue source in 2008, the council budgeted 95% of the receipts. We chose to do that for budget certainty. Anything we collect in excess of the 5% then becomes available for the next year's budget. So this is something that has been tried and true and has been very good for the council. Rate increase, as you note, July 1st with this past legislature, we went from a 6.5% rate for motor vehicle sales tax up to a 6.875%, 6 7/8. Then our portion of that decreased from 36% down to 34.3%. If you take the two together, basically it was just a modest increase for the council. So basically it pretty well stayed flat for council operations for motor vehicle sales tax. State appropriations, as I mentioned, we get that from the legislature, and that is for both rail and for metro mobility operations. We had talked about federal relief funds. The council was a recipient of the 725. $686 million stayed within council operations. The balance went to the suburban providers. It's awarded based upon the 5307 formula guidelines. I think you're aware we received on an annualized basis. We get 5307 formula funds that we use to buy our buses, our shelters, those types of items. These dollars came into the council following those same guidelines. The dollars came in with an emphasis on payroll, transit operation expenses, and the following item is there. It says the grantee must follow federal rules and guidelines, and we must follow those. And I can tell you that last year we were actually audited by the FDA for the first year of the federal expenses. They audited it very, very closely. We came through fine, but they audited every one of our disbursements, our polls, making sure we had the appropriate documentation to document the expenses. So we received the 725, but the federal government is watching those funds very closely. Our overall budget framework is, first of all, we roll up the major budget revenues. We go by our respective departments, identify the salaries, benefits, other costs. We roll everything up to within the divisions. As we talked about the Metropolitan Transportation Sales Tax, it's in progress. We're continuing to do a lot of work on that. We're continuing to look at service, ridership, by meeting the service demands. As Leslie mentioned also, we're very happy. We're able to hire a lot more operators. We're making some adjustments with our August pick, and we're hoping those adjustments will continue moving forward in the balance of the year into 2024. We're making advances in Metro Transit's Stronger, Better, and Strategic Plan, which will include investments in customer experience improvements, security, facility upkeep and technology, workforce shortage. We've been talking to the council over the last year and a half. The fact is we've had a lot of challenges with workforce. That's with operators, mechanics, our police. We're seeing some dramatic improvements, some pleasing improvements that we're getting a lot of people coming to our various labor fairs, job fairs, and we're able to hire a number of operators, which we're very happy about. Service levels within the budget framework for next year. Our bus service is projected to be at about 88% of the pre-COVID levels, so we're slowly bringing that up. Light rails forecast to be at 100% of pre-COVID levels. We'll be back to the 10-minute frequency. North Star, we're planning to return back to 8 trips per weekday, and with special events. And Metro Mobility will be at full pre-pandemic levels. Some of the items that we do to mitigate revenue and expenses, as I talked about already, we do budget motor vehicle sales tax at 95%. Receipts in excess of that are used in the next year. Fuel price hedging, the Council for Budget Certainty, we actually hedge about approximately 90 to 95% of our consumption of fuel for the next 24 months. We consume about 7 million gallons. We're the largest consumer of diesel fuel in the state of Minnesota. So for budget certainty, we hedge out about 90% of that volume for the next 24 months. So every month, as contracts, as they expire, we sell them, we re-enter into new contracts, just for that budget certainty moving forward. We've talked about the programming of federal relief funds, operating fund reserves. The council has a policy of 8.3% of its expenses, and we are exceeding that on all of our lines. And we're continuing to work, as I mentioned, on the Metropolitan Transportation Sales Tax. Risk, within any budget you do have risk. We're continuing to watch and to monitor that risk, ridership and the travel demand. One of the things, I guess I feel that one of the strongest risks we have in our budget, our multi-year budget, is ridership. Ridership, as Leslie mentioned, is slowly coming back. We're seeing improvements in ridership. We're hoping that will continue to return. That's one of the things that we will keep the council informed as to where ridership is and how it's continuing through 2024 and thereafter. Sales tax volatility. As we mentioned, we have the volatility both on the motor vehicle sales tax, but we'll also have it also with our new Metropolitan Transportation Sales Tax. We've talked about workforce, fuel prices, continuous evaluation. One of the things that we will continually be doing the rest of this year and for the next future years is continually re-evaluating all of our assumptions, our budget assumptions. One of the things that we've talked to the council about is with the metropolitan area sales tax, like I mentioned, we are developing these multi-year, 30-year models. This is a model that'll be a standing model that we plan to update every single year on a 30-year rolling average and keep it rolling. So that way we can come back and report to the council, this is how we're doing, this is how we're doing according to receipts, but this is how our forecasted current and future year expenditures are going according to the future receipts. This is the slide that I somewhat take a little bit of a sigh over when I look at. This is ridership. Council ridership, as you can see back in 2019, we had just over 82 million rides. Then in March of 2020, the pandemic hit. Ridership plummeted for us. In 2022, our actual rides were around 42 million rides. We're forecasting ridership to come back next year at about 48 million rides. We're seeing about a 20% increase year over year in our bus system and our light rail system this year compared to last year, and we're anticipating that ridership trend will continue. But that's one of the other things that possibly could change between now and the public hearing draft is we're going to continue to watch ridership. I'm gonna work with our strategic initiatives department. We're gonna reforecast it before October, and we may make a change between now, positive or negative, but we will talk to the council about it when we recommend that change. Now the fun part of the budget, let's start talking some numbers. Our overall budget for transit operations is $752 million. On the left-hand side, the uses by department, Metro Transit bus is the largest piece of that. We're in at just over $441 million, or 59% of the budget. Then we have light rail, about $108 million. Commuter rail, about $18 million budget. Metro mobility in at $105 million. And then we have the balance of contracted services, planning, and transit capital. Transit capital is folks that are working on capital projects. We run it through the operating budget and transfer it over to the capital budgets. Right-hand side, uses by category. We're a very labor-intensive organization. Operators, mechanics, cleaners, fuelers, those types of staff. Salaries and benefits, $420 million, or 56% of our budget. We have contracted services, which is with the Metropolitan Transportation Services, about 20% of our budget. We have fuel in at 4%, or $31 million. That's our diesel fuel. We have the shared regional allocations, and then some other costs of about 11% of the budget. Transportation service sources. Now this is one of the slides that's a little different than what we've historically seen. You see your standard motor vehicle sales tax, that's in at about 42% of the budget, and with the state appropriations, which make 12% of the budget. The new piece of the state piece is the regional transit sales tax. This is the sales tax of 3/4 cent. The $49 million here represents the portion of the counties that I mentioned that those grant agreements are canceled. We're now covering the county's share for the Metro Blue, Green, North Star, which would be Anoka and Hennepin County, and Orange Line. That's in at $49 million. That's the one piece of the pie that will change between now and when we bring the budget back in October. We have federal funds in at $110 million. That's for some of our CMAX service, but a big piece of that is our federal relief funds. Fares in it about 8% of our budget, and planned use of reserves of $118 million. One of the things that we talked about in the management committee prior to this meeting is we brought a budget amendment forward in June of 2023, where we brought in an additional $50 million of federal relief funds. At the federal level, when they were going through the debt ceiling discussions this past spring, there was concern that there was going to be a clawback of the federal dollar. We did a quick analysis and identified that we had about another $50 million of eligible expenses that could be drawn against those federal funds. So we chose to bring in a budget amendment, pull in an additional $50 million in 2023. That's going to fall to our reserves in 2023, but now will be used in 2024 operations. Our main point of doing that was to protect the federal dollars, so they would not get clawed back if that case that would ever come to be. The final slide that I have here for Metro Transit, this is a new slide for us. It's just basically to give you a feel for the size of our organization we really have. We have our budget for Metro Transit. This is bus, light rail, commuter rail. It's just over a $600 million budget. Salaries and benefits are $411 million of that budget. We have just under 3,300 FTEs. This is all your operators, your mechanics, your fuelers, your cleaners, administrative staff, all our engineering and facility staff that do all the cleaning and maintenance of all of our facilities. A lot of people. If you look at the various departments, you can see some of the big ones. The bus transportation is about $174 million. This is all the operators. Salaries and benefits, 147, just over 1,300 FTEs. Bus maintenance is $109 million, of which they have 491 FTEs. Engineering facilities, all our people that maintain all our facilities, do all the cleaning, etc. That's just over $58 million, 261 FTEs. The next big piece is the police. We had some questions on the police. They have a budget of $46 million next year, 225 people. One of the things, as Leslie mentioned, we've been doing some discussions with the police, the Safety and Security Action Plan. We're planning with next month when we come back with the Safety and Security Action Plan next month to Council to give some more information on the police costs and those types of items. That will also be an additional item that we'll be working with as we integrate the sales tax into the 2024 budget. And we'll come back with some additional items that we're actually planning to spend dollars on for safety and security within the 2024 budget. You'll see the balance of the departments. You have the finance department, $35 million, 171 FTEs. The finance would include all the financial operations, but that also includes all of our inventory shops, all the people that do all the fare collection, repairing fare collection equipment, all those types of departments. Rail operations, this would be Blue Green North Star, $102 million, 488 FTEs. Then you have transit system development, and some of the other various departments, but a $600 million budget, just under 3,300 FTEs. Nick?
All right, thanks, Ed. All right, just one more slide. Just going to quickly touch on a few items for Metro Mobility. There are $35 million of federal funds programmed into the Metro Mobility budget. $32 million is CRISA federal funds, and $3 million is from DHS for agency waivered services. We have budgeted just over $7 million in ridership fare recovery. That's projected at 100% pre-COVID levels. Metro Mobility ridership was at about 82% pre-COVID levels in 2022, and currently we are around 85% pre-COVID levels year to date. Metro Mobility service levels are budgeted at 100% as well, and we're going to continue to monitor ridership and service levels throughout the remainder of 2023, and this is an area that could potentially change between now and the public comment budget. Regular gasoline is assumed at $3.46 per gallon. This was based on 2024 fuel future pricing at the time the preliminary budget was due. MTS with Metro Mobility, we do not hedge. We just use a wholesaler. This is down from $3.98 in the 2023 budget, so about a $3.3 million reduction in fuel costs from 2023. And the last bullet, transitioning to state forecasted program. This does not have any direct impact on the 2024 budget, but it's an item that we will continue to plan for and have conversations with you about it. And Mr. Chair and council members, this is our preliminary 2024 Unified Operating Budget and Levies. We will be back next meeting, August 23rd, 2023, with a business item for the adoption of the preliminary 2024 Unified Operating Budget and the proposed 2023 payable 2024 tax levies.
As I understand it, thank you so much. This is really thorough. And when we take this council action next meeting, it is still a draft, and it goes forward for public comment. And then the final approval is December. Okay.
Chair committee members, when we come back in 2 weeks, basically we'll be taking a vote to set the tax levies.
That's set. Right?
Yeah, now we'll set the tax levies. And then between that and when we go for the public hearing in October, we'll come back in early October with any proposed changes before we send it out for public.
I got it.
For public hearing.
I got it. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we can reduce the levy, but we cannot increase the levy that we will be setting in 2 weeks.
Correct.
That's a big one. And I just want to thank the entire team here at my council for working on this day in and day out and bringing this together. And I really enjoy being on the management committee. Those of you who are on it get to see a lot of this and get regular updates on our investments and so on and so forth. And today's meeting was really fantastic, and it really helped, solidify everything you're all saying today. And I just can't say enough about how great you all are at what you do. And you're just sharp, and you know what you're doing, and you've got your eye on the ball. And it's just something I wish the taxpayers and the customers that we serve every day just knew. Behind all the excellent services we provide, the excellent team that's there doing it every day tirelessly through a pandemic or whatever. And so I just want to thank everybody and for helping us as policymakers understand, which could be very complicated, very simple. And talking about the priorities, I also want to thank Leslie and her team for adding some detail about police this year. We didn't get any of that previously. And so because it's such a focus, more will be coming. But thank you, Leslie, for doing that. A great presentation.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I have a question.
Question?
Yeah, just to reiterate, there will be changes in the transportation budget because we're still working out all the sales tax implications, so that'll come out in the October version of the budget. My question had to do with the FTEs, and so the FTEs as proposed now, we have several new obligations and things we have to do, so are we looking to have those numbers somewhat revised in October as well?
Chair Seelye, Councilmember Barber. I believe so, yes. And as Ed reiterated throughout the presentation, we are still in the process of really analyzing what the sales tax means. And I think, as we all know, it's a large amount of money, but it's also going to cover significant fixed costs. It's going to stave off our fiscal cliff, and it will cover capital maintenance. So Ed and Marie and many others, Nick, have all really been working to understand what this means. So that will then inform where we can build capacity, and I imagine that will include adding additional staff, just given the volume of additional investment that's coming to the council. But certainly that would be something we'd want to talk about before the public comment draft is adopted.
Yeah, Councilmember Carter.
Thank you again for a fantastic presentation. So much complexity in this budget with such depthness. Appreciate it. And I look forward to the upcoming meeting and beyond, where we will be confirming through the year the budget that we will finally adopt in December. I wanted to ask a very brief question. You touched on the fund balance and the policy for fund balance, which establishes a minimum in the transportation area. That may be true across the board. And I'm just wondering if there is a maximum fund balance in our policy, and if we have any rules around what happens when the fund balance exceeds a certain amount. Certainly that probably hasn't been the problem necessarily in the past, but it's becoming more.
Mr. Chair, management, actually they touched on that today because we're above our recommended fund balances, and there will be transfers then in, and there will be a budget amendments as those fund balances get really well beyond what.
I did hear that we're above, however, I didn't hear what the policy is for when we're above.
So Mr. Chair and Council Member, our current target fund policy, 3.8, is actually only setting the minimum.
8.3.
For your percentage, but the policy number
Oh, I'm
is
sorry.
3.8.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry.
If you want to look it up, it's on our website. But it only establishes the minimum. We currently do not have in our policy if there's a ceiling. However, with the new sales tax, we actually don't have a current policy on our operating side either, and setting aside for these huge commitments that are coming. And that will be a policy that you will be seeing, and that's part of the work that we're doing right now.
Well, thank you.
We currently do not have anything for a ceiling, but there will be a justification on why we have that ceiling.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I look forward to it in terms of our need to ensure we're making good use, but also that we're protecting those funds from clawback, such as we needed to do with federal funds from our recent recovery funds.
Two new obligations have, although might be a number of years out, they come at significant high amounts.
And Chair and committee members, one of the items that we do when we do this multi-year forecasting out, one of the things we take, because we have built the reserves because of the federal money, we've built our reserves up.
Right.
Planning to spend that down, and as part of our multi-year forecasting forward, we use it back down to the minimums. That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's pretty much what I was going to say. The transportation ones will look a little artificially high for a brief period of time because we rolled in the federal funds to spend out over time. So it's more of an artifact.
Councilmember Chance.
Yeah, I just had a question on the travel demand, and I know you're analyzing and evaluating that. So I understand that the ridership is different in the express routes compared to the local routes. are we gonna break down the ridership that way and see how that impacts our forecasting?
If I can handle, yeah, Chair, committee members, when we look at, we break it down, for example, we break down the ridership between express, the BRTs, Blue Line, Green Line, North Star, suburban local rides. We break it all down so we can actually see what the trends are. But we're also then looking at the various demand on all those types of routes. And so like you mentioned, we break it down, then roll it back up again.
All right, Councilmember Jensen.
Just one quick question too, and as it relates to North Star, that new sales tax will cover the operations for North Star. It's relieving the counties of all of their obligations, even though North Star seems,
And that
I've
in
always
the
been-
metro area.
yes, okay, right? So that was my question. Because I heard a radio interview or snippets of it with the county commissioner, and it was fascinating, that's all I have to say. But I just was not sure how North Star is gonna be.
Councilmember Barber is gonna give you the
Oh,
answer.
good.
I will attempt to answer the question and they'll fix anything I say that's wrong. Basically what the legislation said was that for any county that still owed us money October 1st before we take over the sales tax, we are to be paid back that funds, and that's likely what you're hearing.
Okay, thank you.
That was our
Mr. Chair.
last minute hallway conversation from disgruntled Met Council members who were saying. So they will have to pay the bills, but then we will cover it in the metro area, so there's areas of Sherburne that it does not be explicit. I really appreciate everybody who spent a little extra time here today, but this is really important kind of work of these budget numbers, and really appreciate everybody's really excellent work. I echo that. Regional Administrator, do you have any reports?
Nothing to report, Chair.
You sure? You want a long speech? Chief Counsel?
Yes, really quick, because otherwise she'll think I was just hazing her, making her sit through a budget meeting. We have a first-year law clerk this summer, Madeline Kim. I wanted to introduce her. Our fourth clerk through the Twin Cities Diversity in Practice program, where we share her with a private law firm, and so they do 10 weeks at a private law firm, and then they do 2 weeks.
And the great part.
Yes, where they really learn the most at either a government or a corporate entity, and we're the only government that participates, to my knowledge. So since we only get her for 2 weeks, we try to cram her with as much public sector legal work as we can. But we are just so excited to have her, and I wanted to have her come and introduce her because she's almost done now with her 2 weeks.
Well, welcome and
Goodbye.
and goodbye.
Come back.
All right, any other comments? If not, this meeting is adjourned. Good to see you all.